Good.
I hope you have your cup of coffee ready.
Yes, water actually.
It's a,
I usually fill up on this
oh,
much, but then you have to drink a lot of water.
okay. Okay. Oh, yes,
Oh,
certainly, certainly, certainly. Okay.
yes, yes. Awesome. So where
And
so where are you based in is it Johannesburg or
yes, yes, yes. Our
okay.
firm is in Johannesburg in Four Ways, which is about 10 minutes from Sandton, because I think everybody knows Sandton. That's our business hub. So we just 10 minutes outside of Sandton in a much peaceful suburb. Because going into Sandton on a normal traffic day is really too much. So
Intense?
we opted to be on the outskirts. Yes, and all of that. So, but that's where we're based now in Johannesburg. And yourself, Toyin, for how long have you been based in Chicago now?
2 years.
Okay.
Before 2 years ago, I was actually in Arkansas. That's where the headquarters of Walmart is. That's where I
Oh, yes,
worked.
yes, yes.
So I worked there. And then about 2 years ago, I moved to Chicago. But
Okay.
just like you, I
Mhm.
actually live like 1 hour quiet suburb,
Oh,
like,
yes, yes, yes,
because
yes.
I have young kids. You don't want,
Oh,
I'm not
yes,
like a
yes.
city. So, bus stops here in my house. Like it's quiet, so
Okay,
it's the same
okay.
thing. But if I need to go into the city, it's
It's
convenient.
easy to reach as well. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's great.
I'm sorry to
Okay.
interject.
Yeah.
It's 3 minutes past 6 in South Africa, and should I open the um, the meeting?
Oh, yes, Albert. Yes, Albert. You already have people waiting to come in.
Yes, sir.
Oh,
I've just opened it
oh,
now.
okay. Oh, please, let's do so. Yeah, let's do that. Thank you so much.
All right,
Oh,
brilliant.
great. Okay. That's welcome, welcome everyone. Friends, or is everyone muted? I take it. Okay. All right. For those of you who just joined us, thank you very much. Please be advised that we will start in exactly 1 minute. We're just giving everybody else an opportunity to connect. Our guest speaker is already here. I'm very excited about this. And maybe, Toyin, maybe what we can do for now, for the memory, for the benefit of those who are here, is just give us a big, brief background of yourself, what you do, how you got to where you are, the rock star that you are now. Obviously, you put a lot of work into that. So just give us some brief background around that, please.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm actually here in Chicago, so it's late morning. It's 11 a.m. here in Chicago, Central Time, but I know it's late evening in South Africa, so good evening to you all. My name is Toyin Umesiri. I'm the CEO of Nazaru LLC, a US-based company that connects the world to Africa through market insights, trade facilitation, consulting, trade events, and more.
Okay.
I also host the Trade with Africa Business Summit, which is an annual convening of global stakeholders when it comes to advancing trade with Africa. So
Okay.
basically, my background is actually in the business world. I spent over a decade in corporate America, working in manufacturing industry for one of the biggest manufacturers in the world, and most recently spent 5 years working at the headquarters of Walmart. Some people might know Walmart.
Yeah, of course, we all do.
Of
We all
course,
do.
yes, yes. In South Africa would be Massmart.
Yes.
So they have a major stake in Massmart in South Africa. So I worked at the headquarters for almost 5 years, and I played various roles, one of which was managing the technology implementation for global sourcing. So our Walmart buys from all over the world, the processes, the systems, the decision process in terms of how trade happens with the world's biggest company, world's largest retailer. So how did I, shift from doing that type of work in merchandising and all of that to this is because within that world of global trade at scale,
Yeah.
it became obvious to me about 5 years ago after I paid a visit. I had an emergency visit to the continent. My dad had passed. And then coming back, it was like going from the most affluent place in the world and then visiting home. And it was a shock to my system because I hadn't been back in over a decade.
Wow.
Right. So when I came here to get my master's degree in 2004, I never looked back. So I was one of those diaspora that didn't look back. So basically, what happened then was me like a juxtapose of working for the biggest company, Fortune 1, knowing what the numbers were, knowing what the rest of the world was doing, and then coming to the continent and saying, wait a minute, what's going on? Is the continent advancing? What are the gaps? So basically, after that journey, I started the research of looking at numbers and saying, why are African countries, why are Africa's exporters not playing as they could be on the global trade space, right? So that was the first question that I had to embark on in trying to answer. And then once I found the answer, the next thing was, what can I do? What should I be doing to help close that gap? And the work that we do at Nazaru has been focused on closing the trade gaps between Africa and the rest of the world, particularly here in the US. So that's a
Wow.
short
Wow. Wow.
introduction.
That's an amazing story. Wow, it's a very big one, I must say. Short but very detailed. Well done, Twain. And tell me, so basically your exposure to what you were seeing at Walmart is what inspired you to go into this space, right? And when you were saying that you wanted to close the trade gaps, what is it of particular importance that was of concern to you, so that inspired you to basically take that route?
Okay. So when you think about it, Africa has 55 countries. Some people say 54, right? Because of the split. But let's just say 54. That is a quarter of the number of countries in the world, right? There are just over 200 countries globally. So sitting in Africa, on the African continent,
Sure.
is a quarter of the number of countries in the world.
Okay.
But guess what? When you look at the numbers, Africa only does 2% of trade with America. Okay, 2%. So a quarter of the world does 2%, and that 2%, when you dive into it, they're typically oil, not really non-oil exports.
Yes.
They're usually focused on oil, minerals, and things like that, extractives. So 2%, so maybe less than 1% of US global trade is actually with sub-Saharan Africa. And then you say, and the number has been on the decline the last few years. So those are the type of reality data points that we say, why?
Yes.
Why does America only do 2% trade, 2% of its global trade with a quarter of the world's countries, which is the African continent? And what you find out is that things like, market information is missing. So for an investor that is interested in investing on the continent, it's so much hassle trying to find data points that supports investment on the continent. Part of the challenge we've also seen is that Africa and African nations have not managed their global narrative, right? They don't own their global narrative. So when you're talking to potential investors or potential people that want to engage or potential buyers, they've never really seen the continent through the lens of trade and investment. The international media has portrayed the entire continent as a region of war, famine, disease, corruption, right? So when business people internationally think of Africa, the first challenge we have before us is, mindset shift. Because what we've also not done well, especially the political elite on the continent, is when they go to Washington or other regions, political centers in the world, they're always talking through the lens of foreign aid. Help Africa. My people are poor. Help us. But foreign aid is not foreign trade.
Oh, yes.
And the people you talk to, if you want trade, is not the same people you talk to if you want aid. And the communication and the way you message for trade and investment is different from aid. In the world of trade and investment, you're talking of return on investment. If you're talking to an investor, you're not going to say, come and help us. Help you to, are you telling me to donate? Are you telling me to donate? Because investors are looking at, if I put, for every dollar I put in your region, you need to show me how soon can I get my dollar back? And then on top of that, what's my return on investment? And when can I earn? What percentage can I earn back? So you find out that the conversation has to change. The conversation that Africa is having with the world has to change. For us to
Yeah.
drive trade and investment. Because if you approach any company today and you're talking about trade and investment and you start with, oh, my people are poor, I need this, I need that, they're going to run away from you. Or they're going to say, oh, go to our foundation. They're going to pass you on to their foundation or their charity. And that defeats the whole purpose of trade and investment.
Right. We seem to have lost Mr. Mkonazi, but I think you can proceed now with your presentation for tonight.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. This is Toyin Umesiri. If you're just joining, I was just sharing my background in terms of the work that I do at Nazaru. I'm here in Chicago. And at Nazaru, we connect the world to Africa through trade engagement, through trade facilitation, education consulting, and more. And what we have found is that there are opportunities to grow both regional and global trade. I actually serve as intra-African trade ambassador by appointment of the African Export-Import Bank and the African Union. Today, I would also love to hear from you if there are particular questions on your mind. But our goal at Nazaru is to drive increased trade engagement with the continent of Africa. What I was just sharing a while ago was the fact that the US currently does only 2% of its total global trade with the rest of the world. So just to do a sound check, I hope everybody can hear me clearly.
We're receiving you well, ma'am.
Fantastic. So yes, US currently does,
I love it, yeah.
good. The US currently does about 2% of its total trade with the continent of Africa, and Africa, you know, on the continent seats 54, 55, which is a quarter of the number of countries in the world. So the question is, how do we increase trade with Africa? So if you're on the continent, you need to first think about, who am I serving? And who am I trying to connect with? Because from a business standpoint, we almost have to go back to the foundation of business and having a service mindset to say, how do I connect with people, not just locally, but regionally and globally? Before trade transactions happen, people have to be at the negotiating table to engage with one another. And what we like to say is that there are three markets you need to think about: your local market, your regional market, and your global market. So when you say local market, meaning the rules of engagement within your local market. So if you're in South Africa, how do you buy, sell? If you're in Nairobi, how do you buy, sell? For me here, how do we buy, sell within our local market? The next thing you also now think about is, could I expand my business across my border, the regional market? If you're in Africa, you now start thinking, if I'm in South Africa, how do I engage with Nigeria, with Ghana, with Ethiopia? What are the rules of engagement when I leave my country? How do I export? What's licensing? What certifications do I need? What are the rules in that market I'm trying to penetrate? And then when you go global, you're leaving your region and then you're engaging with Europe, with UK, with US, Canada, Mexico, Latin America, China, right? What we now try to educate people on is the rules of engagement shifts. For many people, they may not realize that before they go look from local to regional or global, that they really have to acquire new skills. That's the first thing people need to realize, is that if you show up to the global stage unprepared, you're leaving that room empty-handed. And that's what we've been seeing, that people go internationally for engagement, for exhibitions, they travel, but then you're like, nothing happened for me. The reason is because I tell people 3 months before you even show up to any international engagement, you need to have done your research. Who are the companies that would be there? What do I want? What do they want? And when I shake their hands, how can we engage, from a commercial standpoint, not just, hello, hi, So those are some of the things we are now doing, we've started some education classes where we're talking about trade and investment facilitation, so that we can equip people to understand that there are various stakeholders in closing a trade deal. How you communicate with them has to be different. So if you're engaging with a buyer, an international buyer, what they want looks different. How they want to engage looks different. If you're engaging with a financing bank, what they want is different. How they want to engage is different. And then the other thing is, how do you position yourself so that your potential clients can see you, they can know you exist, and they can connect with you? Because what we've seen is that the world, I've not been educated on trade with Africa. African governments, African countries need to do a better job of investment promotion. From what we have seen, the South African government does the best job so far, and then Rwanda and the South African government, they are really at par in terms of how they promote investments within their region. Nazari is actually partnering with the Nigerian consulate out of New York. Next month, we'll be hosting the first ever Nigerian investment conference. And the reason we are doing this is because when we say trade with Africa and people say, okay, Toyin, Nazaru, we now hear you, we're open to those engagements. Where are those opportunities on the continent? Which country should we be penetrating? Can you be specific? So those are the reasons we're now going country by country as well, to narrow down, because again, the data points for trade and investment is not vast. So there has to be more work to make information available. So I'll stop right there because I want questions. If you have questions, that way I can help address questions that may arise.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Toyin. I think that was very helpful, especially the mindset shift, which for me is one of the big issues. And as you're saying, owning the narrative, because, one of the beauties when I had this future was when I read a short article of someone saying that in the previous industrial revolutions, we had what we call the haves and the have-nots, and in today's industrial revolution, we have what we call the haves and the want-nots. And the want-nots are basically the people who decide to sit on the touchlines of, the technological revolution that's taking place and not participating. But the opportunity that I saw from this is that suddenly you had a platform where you can create your own narrative, right? Where you can decide, how you want to be perceived, how you want to be, understood, and without anyone sifting that information. Because you can imagine, traditionally, if you, for example, as Toyin, wanted to host this Nigeria, investment conference, you would have to rely on a newspaper or a radio station or a television station to market. But now you can literally just wake up and say, I'm doing this conference and I'm posting and you know, Bob is your uncle. So how do you think, you know, that African countries, talking about the narrative that you've spoken of, can take advantage of this new platform where the narrative needs to change? Because you're absolutely right. I see it even in, you know, in, let's say, in non-profit organizations. We always have a fundraising mentality, you know, that we want to support or sponsor a bursary. Where do we go to raise funds? Instead of saying, why don't we put in our funds and get the ball rolling and moving? So just as an entry point, how can African countries use this platform? I like the fact that at Walmart, you spoke, you know, in terms of what you were doing there, and then the tech implementation. So clearly you're not a novice, you know, when it comes to that. So can you just give us, whilst our colleagues are planning their questions, just an overview on how to use for African countries these platforms?
Yes, I thank you for that. So I think the first thing is understanding that trade and investment is value for value.
Okay.
Okay? That's the first thing. Even
Yes.
when you talk about us hosting global events, you know, investment conferences, trade with Africa conferences, the reality is, yes, the platform is available to anybody. Anybody can wake up and say they want to do X, Y, Z. But the reality is that if you don't articulate the value that you're bringing to people, nobody will show up. Okay? So being able to
Oh, yes.
connect what people are needing, creating a platform that supports people's aspiration is key in the world of trade and investments. So our engagement, in fact, before we even start at all, you know, I mean, 3-4 years ago, before we even started the Trade with Africa Business Summit, there were several meetings that I had with investors to say, we're trying to bring stakeholders together, okay? The reason we want to bring them together is because we know everybody wants the same thing, but they are speaking different languages. They are running like cats and dogs all over the place. We have investors, we have this, we have this. Everybody's like, we want trade, but they're not talking. They're not in the same room. They're not going by the same playbook. That was why we said we wanted to bring them into the room, because we were talking to individuals and we said, we know we all want the same thing, but the way to advance trade and investment is to go by a playbook. You know what the rules are. So even before we started, we were engaged, you know, behind the scenes with investors, buyers, and I had to ask them, what do you want to see? What information are you looking for? What don't you have today? What will help you make a decision? And those are the things we put together to create our concept notes. And that's why we've been successful so fast. And that's why the adoption is growing steadily.
I see. So go
Go
for it,
on.
Jane. Go for it. Go for it.
So the key is know the value you're bringing to every engagement. Know the value you're bringing, and number two, know what you want in return. That's where transactions come in. So it's not a one-way engagement. You can say things like, I offer these services, meaning this is what I can do for you. And then in exchange for my services, I want this percentage cut, this. That's where deals, that's when you start designing deals. In your legal profession, right? People can shake hands. When they shake hands, you now have to go back. What are the terms of this deal? And that's where you start negotiation. So the first thing is, when you are entering any room, when you are entering any engagement, especially in the world of trade and investments, know what you're bringing. And the way you also design what you're bringing is, you should have done your research on the people you're going to meet there. What are they looking for?
Yes, yes, yes.
Right? So that's when we can increase trade, is when we know what is America looking for. What are American buyers looking for? The moment you know that, then you can say, I can offer you that. And if I offer you that, let's do it this way. So a lot of times we're going to get into the technicalities of the
Mhm.
written law and the legal structure. But I'll tell you, that first space that I'm just talking about, it's the
Mhm.
biggest trade barrier that we have.
Wow, wow, absolutely amazing. In fact, on the issue of you basically just saying, and this is it sounds as you know, a fact not just in trade and investments, but in life as well. You know, as a person, you need to know what you're offering. You need to know what you're about, because it's only when you know what you can offer and what you're about that you're able to engage with the other people, and the people can have confidence in you. Unlike if you wishy-washy and saying, "Oh yeah, I think maybe we can do a deal. I'm not sure exactly how to go about this," and all of that. But another question we have from Wilson Mohoba here is that how much of the mind shift is about Americans changing their views of Africa? Is this mind shift only from the continent side, or is it a universal mind shift that is required here, Toyin?
Both sides need different types of mind shift. On
Mm,
the American side, what I try to tell them is Africa now has options when it comes to trade partner. You're in competition with China, you're in
mm,
competition with Russia. So you also don't just expect Africans to buy whatever it is you're trying to sell. You've got to sell yourself. You need to start seeing Africans as buyers, and you need to start treating Africans as customers, right? Instead of what used to
mm,
happen before, to say we're doing you a favor. No, you're not doing Africa a favor, not anymore. Africa has options. We can buy
mm.
from China, we can buy from Russia, we can buy from Turkey. We have options. So tell us why we should engage with US. So the mindset shift, it's a shocking, it's a different way that US has to engage with the continent. And I think they're changing slowly because they see the inroads that China is having on the continent.
My next question is, how much ground has the US lost uh, in trade with Africa, considering that China has entered
Yes,
the race?
saying. Okay, and that was going to be my next issue. You know,
Okay, I think we lost, but I got the question. So let me go straight for that. Um, they've lost a lot of ground. They actually acknowledge it. I was also on a call. They have the Presidential Advisory Council on Doing Business in Africa that sits in DC, and it's a group of private sector investors in US, that they're designing plans in terms of how to engage, how to trade and invest with the continent. And I believe they do acknowledge that China is more engaged on the continent. But I tell you, this is what I would say. When US decides and they get on the same page and they have a goal and they align their resources behind that goal, then you're going to see movement. And that's what is happening right now. So over the next 2, 3 to 5 years, you're going to see increased US involvement on the continent. The last 2 years, with presidential shift, with change in administration, they spent it more, establishing Prosper Africa, establishing, intergovernmental agencies, bringing themselves together to say we need to all work as one as we're approaching the continent. But right now, as we speak, it's game on, meaning they have their plan. It's now execution time. So the next 2 years, US Africa trade, I see it increasing because the US has actually aligned resources behind aggressively pursuing trade with Africa. So the next thing is Africa ready to engage?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for your response. So my other question is, what's the difference in policy between China's, trade policies with Africa, or even with the world, as well as the difference in policy between the policies of the United States? Basically, what I'm trying to ask is, which of the two countries is much easier to trade with? Yeah.
Okay. You know, when you say easier, easier is a relative term. Easier can cost you a lifetime. So if you say easier, on the surface, you might say it's easier to deal with China. But then the fine print of what you're signing could cost you the next 30, 50 years of your country. So in trade deals, I'm one of those people that would always say, in fact, in my class on Saturday, the first thing one of the things I told them is never rush any trade engagement. Take your time. Read every line, read every letter, understand it. Don't just read and go over it. Actually understand what it is you're signing. If it will take you 6 months, take that 6 months. Because if you don't, and you put pen to paper, you could be sacrificing 20, 30 years and you can't recover that. So easier doesn't mean better. Easier doesn't mean more productive for the continent. So I wouldn't even use the word easier in my book. What I would say is which one is more beneficial to what Africa is trying to do. And let me start going down the line. I will mention a few things to look at it from. Number one, when China comes, they typically would approach the political elite and say, hey, we can build that bridge for you. In fact, we will finance building that bridge for you. And in fact, we will bring the people from China, our labor, to drive down the cost of labor of building that bridge. All you have to do is sign right here. So the political elite will say, you mean I don't have to do anything? You mean I just have to sign? That's it? China will say, yes, just sign right here. We will finance it for you. We will bring the labor. And before you know it, there will be a bridge right there. Now, so that's been the mode of operation across the continent. Now, let me knock that down to what those issues are. Number one, if you're going to finance a deal, at least finance a deal that your private sector would benefit from, your taxpayer. Because if you borrow money from China, who is going to pay that bill for the next 20, 30? It's still your private sector. But guess what you just did? You just financed the Chinese private sector. Because that money would then go from Chinese government into the pockets of the Chinese private sector that would do that construction work. So basically, you're sitting down, you see a bridge, but who is going to pay for that bridge? But the people that will pay for that bridge, you didn't create jobs for them. So the first thing Africans need to realize is I'm not against financing. Most of the big things we need to do on the continent will require heavy lifting. But if you're going to finance such that it will generate internal activities in your local country. That if you're financing a billion deal, make sure 800 million comes back into your banks. Make sure that money comes into your bank and kickstart some internal, commercial engagement, that you can hire your youth workforce, that your local construction and engineering companies can get deals and get those contracts. That's actually how you jumpstart economic development. Borrow, but make sure inside of your country, there's economic activities generated from that fund. But if you don't do that, you've just generated economic activity for China. Now, also on the Chinese side, typically the knowledge goes away. The knowledge to build that bridge or do that construction or do that nuclear plant, whatever it is, that knowledge goes away because you did not keep it in your country. Now, what usually happens with US is quite different. The rules of engagement looks differently. The legal, they follow all the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and all of those things. And at the end of the day, they're usually they're not looking to stay permanently. So they usually do a lot of partnerships. They usually work with your local agencies. In fact, they usually invest more in training and all of that. So what I would say is, again, I wouldn't look at it through the lens of easiest to deal with on the surface, US might be a little bit more challenging to engage because of the rules of engagement, foreign corrupt practices. They have to abide by so many laws to protect their markets. So on that note, you can say it's more difficult. But the question I would ask is, which trade region is the most beneficial for the future of Africa? And that would be the question I'll be asking, to say we need to challenge our political leaders to say, just because it looks easy to sign a document, what did you just sign? Did you just mortgage the next 30 years where the future of Africa will still be paying that bill? Meanwhile, the clients and the construction company that did that work, they've moved on to the next product. They've made revenue. They've benefited from that debt.
Okay, now tell me, Twain, colleagues, please, since we are now in the question and answer session, be at liberty to raise your hand. Alternatively, if I don't see you, you're welcome to just talk, and we'll pick it up from there. But you mentioned something, Twain, about what Americans want, in terms of your planning your market and all of that. So what do you think are products that Africa, should be looking at in terms of, accelerating U.S.-Africa trade relations?
Right. So in the world of trade, you always need to look bilateral, meaning both direction. So there's a group on in the US that all they want is they want to export their equipment, their machines, their seed. It's primarily America first, exporting, increasing US exports. And the US Exim Bank, Export Import Bank, who we featured, and if you want to learn more about how that bank works, we have content on that. But the US Export Import Bank actually finances increase in US exports, where they can do deals and structure deals that are actually guaranteed, where even if there's an issue on the African continent and the distributor is not able to pay, the US government would actually guarantee, I think, 85% of that fund to an exporter in the US. So there's one school that is driven more on US exporting to Africa, right? There's another group that is focused on importing from Africa, right? With the disruption of the US-Africa trade war, buyers are now looking for alternative sources of supply to say, whoa, if I bring things from here, they're going to charge me extra tariff under the Trump administration. Where else in the world can I buy that? So there's a scramble now where they're looking across the world to say the things that import substitution and things they could buy today, is it now becoming more expensive to buy it from China in terms of manufacturing going up? So look at it through the lens of there are trade deals that would have to do with, okay, there's a local farmer or in South Africa that needs some new tractors, that needs some new equipment, or they're trying to grow the agricultural value chain. Where can we get expertise? Where can we get seeds? Where can we get the knowledge or the tools that we want to develop our agricultural value chain? Now Africa has to say the equipment, right? The tools that will help you industrialize or to go into mainstream farming. Where is that going to come from? Well, America has already solved that. They have a lot of solutions. From a US standpoint, that will be driving exports to the continent. And there's a lot of backing that the US government supports, and they love that. But in the buying community, it's also the reverse. So the reverse could be things like oils, non-oil export. There could be oil, but non-oil exports. I know in South Africa, you have like wine and fruits and textile and things like that. Now, the scaling up of that is where you now have to start building trade relations and trade relationship, because again, if they don't see you, if they don't know where you are, trade doesn't happen, right? The other thing that is extremely challenging is that the African market is not organized. The biggest buyer, let me just put it this way, when McDonald's is buying sesame seed, they're not looking for one bucket of sesame seed. They're looking for volume. So the African market has to organize itself. That is not just one man's business, two people's business. It has to be sesame manufacturers of Africa. What can you produce? And that's where the opportunities are on the continent, is that we are so used to dealing in the local space where it's me, my business, what can I sell you that is just this much and go home. But in the world of global trade, it's scale, it's volume. And China does this thing well, where they go, they get the volume by, I can produce you 1 million, 2 million, 5 million pieces. And then they take that demand, they go take back home, and then they break it down to 100 suppliers to produce the same thing. That's where what we don't know in Africa is that they get one demand and then they push it to 100 suppliers and they give them the specification and they say, you just produce to this specification. Right? So all of a sudden, that's how you go after volume demand on the global market. Individuals cannot meet the demand.
Now tell me, Toyin, there's a question here I see from one of our guests, Wilson, and he's saying that Ghana recently concluded a bauxite trade and investment deal with China based on barter trade. Is this kind of model, palatable to U.S. companies?
Well, Ghana is being extremely smart. In fact, was it last year? I was on a panel here in Chicago. Alaji Baumia, who is the vice president from Ghana, we were speakers at the same event in University of Chicago, and we were in the same room, and he actually explained what they were doing in Ghana and how they were twisting and shifting the type of negotiations they were doing in China. So I think Ghana is probably one of the most savvy, and they are not even using just one approach. They are, depending on what commodity it is they're negotiating on, they are actually designing unique value proposition and exchange. So it's more of commodity by commodity, project by project. They are negotiating differently with China than the rest of Africa. So I would say people need to take, because the deals they have and even 2 weeks ago we had the advisor of the president of Ghana at one of my engagements. So I'm watching Ghana really closely. They are extremely smart. They're extremely savvy. So they are not saying we don't want to deal with you, but you're going to deal with us on our terms.
On our terms, yeah.
On our terms. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
And yeah, go for
yes,
it. Go for it.
And again, each of those terms is driven by Ghana's strategic positioning of how they see that project or how they see that commodity within their own portfolio.
I see. That's absolutely innovative. Do you think it's a model that can work for American companies, or for America for that matter?
I think any model can work in negotiation when both parties agree.
Okay.
Right?
So
it's
there's
not
no
a
hard and fast there, basically.
No, there's no hard and fast rule. The problem we have on the continent is that we're not making demands. We're not making demands. We're just accepting whatever people on the opposite side says. That's the problem. And if you agree, so that a deal happens once everybody agrees. So you could be agreeing to anything, and you sign your signature, and they go happy, and you don't know what you sign. So I wouldn't say what do I prescribe. I'm saying, first of all, decide what you want. What type of nation do you want? Now, when you talk about the AfCFTA, I'm telling you, the AfCFTA is a game changer, because it is Afrocentric, and it is designed for Africans to win first before any foreigner. It is designed, when you start breaking it down, even for me, I'm learning every day, where for foreign brands that want to expand on the continent under AfCFTA, they have to work with an African. They have
Wow,
to. The
absolutely amazing. Yes.
AfCFTA is designed to say, if you
Yeah.
want to operate in South Africa only, operate. But if you want to manufacture in South Africa and then export it out beyond South Africa under AfCFTA, a foreigner cannot do it without an African.
Yes, yes, I understand that. Now, well, one of the questions is, it almost sounds like it's a, a candy shop war between the U.S. and China, because the question here is how has the U.S. basically created favorable trading conditions, or terms rather, for Africa vis-a-vis China? Because it would seem that it's almost like a race to the bottom, oh, they're doing this, we're going to do that, and so on. So from that point of view, what's your view on that, Jane?
This is what I would say. It's a good place for you to have two boyfriends fighting for you. If you have two people as Africans, if you have two people fighting each other and saying, I want you, then that means it's for you to play hard to get. Play hard to get. You now have now Africa, instead of as Africans, us asking them, no, we should be asking ourselves, what do we want? And then saying we would only play with people that would give us what we want. Because you now have negotiating power. Africa now has negotiating power. Now, if the world wasn't interested in you and you were the one doing the chasing, then you are the one saying, whatever you want, we will do, whatever you want. No, now we actually have purchasing power. So we have to look inward to say, under what terms do we want to play with America? Under what terms do we want to play with Russia? Under what terms do we want to play with anybody else? And that is what's missing.
Yes.
It's that I say it this way, that the world knows what it wants from Africa. Does Africa knows what it wants from the world?
I think that's a very critical question to ask, Toyin. And in fact, in our first webinar, we hosted the CEO of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and he mentioned a similar point around education. And he was saying that the narrative that goes on out there is almost like only people in diplomacy or the state requires this education, but actually business people requires it even more, because there's a wrong perception, or that business people are probably much more savvier and understand the game, but actually you find that there's a lot of them who are completely inward looking. But on this point, you spoke about in your introductory remarks, market information, data points, and so forth. So if I want to now, after I've done all the advice you've given me today, know thy product, know thy price, know thy needs and desires. I now know that, and now I'm ready to move. I've done my market analysis and all of that. So where do I find this market information if I want to go into the US market?
Yes. So once we've done all of that work, that's when we now come in at Nazaru, because a lot of times people approach us from different angles, but they're not ready. They're not ready. They've not been prepared. We almost have to go through some preparatory mind shift to say, if I put you in front of a buyer, what are you going to say? When they start asking you this type of questions, do you even know what to answer? So part of the work we do is we actually help those who are ready to export from the continent prepare a pitch deck. And the pitch deck really is the first introduction. So now we are moving into the execution phase. We've gone through, mindset shift. Now in terms of executing trade is, what's your punchline? What's your story? What's your because most of the biggest players, they are going to ask so many questions about your company. What are the numbers you've done before? What's your capacity? Because they're not going to close the deal. The deals they are closing is not for just for today. They are looking for long-term partners, right? They're looking for long-term partnership. So it's not a one-time, let's shake hands, that's it. Most of the time, especially in retail, there has to be consistency in the supply chain. So the questions has to be, how strong is your financial stuff? Can you really fulfill the demand? Before you can get a PO, it has to do with trust. Do we trust that if we sign a deal with you, you actually have the capacity and the financial backing to fulfill those demands? Because in the global space, transactions and trade happens based on trust before, money changes, hands in the bank. What I mean, let me give you a scenario.
Okay.
So let's say textile, because I mean, I'm from the business world. Let's cut through the chase. Let's give scenarios. So this is what happened. Let's say textile. There's a textile manufacturer in South Africa that can produce XYZ. In the US buying cycle, they call it the buying cycle. If you're engaging right now, the buying cycle is about 6 to 9 months, depending on who you're talking to, meaning they close deal in a futuristic way to say 2021 June, for summer cycle, you're going to produce me X number of pieces. And the reality is that deal is futuristic. The PO is written in a futuristic. The terms are written in the future, because for you to actually meet that demand, you need about 8 to 9 months to go into your supply chain and then start looking for who is going to supply me zip. Does it take me 3 months for the zip to arrive? How do I scale up my factory, employ people, train people? They know it will take you 8, 9 months for you to even first ship your first shipments. That's the world of global trade. It's not, if somebody tells you produce 50,000 pieces of pants now, you're going to scramble in your supply chain. You're going to scramble. You're going to need zip. You're going to need button. These are things that don't just arrive overnight, right? So the deals in global markets, it's, again, remember, local, regional, global. In your local market, you will go to a market right now, you bring out your cash, you see what you want to buy, you buy it, you give them money, and you go home. It doesn't happen that way. In the global market, you want to plan backward. And the things that are being sold in 2020, they were deals from last year or 2 years ago. So any engagement right now is futuristic. So the pitch deck is, you're going after future demand. You're saying in 2021 summer, or in 2021 fall, winter of next year, I want to produce these suits or these things for you. And this is now, that's the conversation happening right now. Okay, so it's part of the education we need to also offer, that we support the business communities, understanding the global markets and the cycles that it operates in, right? So the cycle for cashew is different. The planting cycle, the bottling. So we need to start understanding those things, right? When we remove all the mental barriers, the next thing now is, I need to understand if I want to penetrate the apparel cycle or the skincare, because we have brands in the skincare and we operate in the beauty industry as well. In the beauty industry, you have shea butter. How do you package? Just something as simple as label. I'm looking around now. Your label, the rules, the barcode. These things take time. It takes time. So we help with the pitch material, but we also help with streamlining your supply chain. But a lot of times, we Africans, our culture, we don't follow processes, due process. We want to rush everything. But I tell you, in the world of international trade, it might take you 6 months to negotiate a deal. It might take you. You just have to start feeling comfortable doing 6 months trade deal. But after that 6 months is locked down, you are guaranteed 5 to 8 years of deal.
Wow. Wow, absolutely powerful. Someone is asking here, are there similar companies in Africa that do what you guys do?
Um,
I
I,
guess it refers to trade facilitation.
thi- this is what I would advise. If you identify a
Mhm.
market you want to penetrate, you need to know, you need to work. It's advised. I will just put it as advice. You can do what you want to do, but I would advise you to always work with people that understand that local market. So it's like if I want to penetrate South Africa, I wouldn't be working necessarily with US. I will be working with somebody that can tell me everything and save me time in South Africa, that knows how to ship, what documents it is, what new rules are coming. I'll be looking to a South African to educate me about the South African market. That's the gap. Because just think about it here. In order to ship anything to the US, there has to be a local agent that would close and sign all the import documents. You cannot do that from Africa. Just like if somebody shipped something into South Africa, somebody in South Africa has to go clear the clear customs, right? So those are some of the
Yeah,
things we are trying to get people to see. Under African, so AGOA, African Growth and Opportunity Act, has been open for 20 years. It's going to expire in 5 years. The US market has been open from a non-tariff barrier. So we've also explained something through some of the engagements we've done in the past around tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers when you're talking about market access. Tariff barriers is when you say, I'm going to charge you 10%, 15%, 25%, 30% on top of everything you bring in, so that you are not dumping things in my in my country, so that you have to compete with existing industries in the country you're coming in. That's tariff barrier. Non-tariff barriers are standards that is expected. If you're bringing agricultural products, you have to abide by Department of Agriculture standards, right? If you're bringing food and drug,
yeah,
anything along that line, you have to abide by FDA principles. The US under AGOA has eliminated tariff barriers for Africa, but non-tariff barriers, their standards remains it as it is. They're not lowering their standards for Africans exporters. No. So non-tariff barrier is zero, meaning bring what you want to bring if it falls into the 6,000 products. If you are from eligible African countries, bring it in without quota. But guess what? Standards. Standards remain. So we now have to educate people on those standards, those
yeah.
non-tariff barriers. And that's the assignment for the business community. And the last 20 years, many regions in Africa, they've not they've not been able to penetrate because they don't want to do that work. I don't know. I don't want to just generalize, but I'm just saying there's still work that has to happen,
Yes,
not just in not
yes.
just in tariff, in non-tariff
Mm-hmm.
barriers to penetrate the African
Non-tariff,
market.
yes,
And those are the
yes,
things that the business community
absolutely.
needs to focus on.
Yeah, and for the benefit of our guests, just one example of a non-tariff barrier usually comes in the form of sanitary and phytosanitary measures. An example was there was a case at the WTO where one of the South American countries took the United States to the WTO because the United States didn't like the way they were catching their sardines. You know, they felt the way they were catching the fish was inhuman and unhygienic. And therefore, they literally blocked the sardines from being imported into America. And that was the case before the WTO. So this is one example of how, you know, non-tariff barriers can be a hindrance if not properly taken care of. But now here I am. I've done everything you said. I'm learning so much today. So you know, I've done everything you said. I've done my market research. I've found potential partners. I've even brushed up my English. I know how to do deals with them. I know where to find my market information. But now there's a dispute you know. I'm exporting something to America, it gets, you know, to the port of New York, it's stuck there, it can't get out. How then, where do I go to for relief to make sure that, you know, my problems are sorted out as quickly as possible?
I'll tell you honestly, that's been the biggest loss for Africa, is because here in America, we've not invested in legal counsel that understands how to navigate the US law. So what has happened most of the time is those goods get destroyed. That's been a lot of the, I mean, because if you don't hire an American lawyer to go fight for you and resolve that, what happens is it's either they destroy it, they'll give you an option to ship it back to you, right? So those are some of the things I'm trying to get people to see, is that if you're operating in the US market, you need to almost have a small team that is managing your business. The moment we start increasing trade, you know, a lot of times, one thing I want to also share with people is operating in America is an expensive thing to embark on. And a lot of times I try to encourage the political side, the ministries of trade, to actually support, for example, South African businesses trying to operate in America. So whether through the embassy, through the consulate, they should be having a strong trade desk that's locally in Africa. You can call your embassy, and because that's what US does. Nobody's going to mess up with any US thing trying to clear into South Africa, because they'll just make a call to their embassy, and their embassy will get them the best lawyer to fight for them. We need to start doing that in reverse. We need to start doing that in reverse. So there's some things we're doing here we have to strengthen our embassies and the consulates of African countries so that they can support the businesses trying to penetrate their market. Because your first point should be to call your consulate or your embassy in that market. And if you call them, they should be ready to because we need to start seeing what is America doing in South Africa. How are they supporting their South African operations? It's their embassy first. And they will call you, they will connect you, and they might even call the port authority and say, hey, tell us what's going on. You
Yes,
know,
yes.
so we need to strengthen, instead of just, again, in the world of trade and investment, it's a different ball game. The policy side needs to start playing a different type of game, not just, oh, help Africa, you know. No,
Yeah.
the trade desks in all embassies, in all African embassies and all African consulates all around the world, needs to have a stronger trade desk that supports advancing trade and investment for the business community.
Wow.
That's the future.
So from what I hear, Toyin, everybody needs a re-education, yeah? And I mean, it makes absolute sense. One of the challenges I've always picked up in international trade relations is that those negotiations, engagements, and so on are executed by government officials, you know, the bureaucracy. Most of the time, the business people are not even in the room. You know, they get called in for summits to sign this or to sign that. But the reality is that, you know, we've entrusted this very important thing, you know, which is accelerating intra-Africa trade to people who literally would not know how to sell, you know, ice to an Eskimo, and then you're expecting this to be the people to take it off. So clearly, it looks like from this, you know, mental shift, unless we get that right first, we will just continue to be stuck where we are. Because I mean, I know, for example, in the public service, usually phone calls are never returned. So in a South African environment, if your staff from the US is stuck somewhere in a port here, and I'm just giving an example, and for example, you want to follow that up, but the civil servant is not answering your phone. That has serious, you know, economic consequences for you as the exporter, and of course, for the country as a whole. So clearly, this education thing, how do we get it right? You know, Toyin, I see you have certainly started with the master classes that you're providing. Interesting stuff. I've seen the work you're doing and so on. So how do we get this re-education right? Because it's like a reset, yeah? It's a
Yeah,
reset, a complete
it's
reset
a
you're talking
reset.
about.
Absolutely. I can tell you what we are doing. In fact, just this week, I think I can share this now public. There are so many things we do we don't share publicly, but I can share
Okay.
with you that we're partnering with the African Union to train all the economic officers in terms of trade and investment facilitation. We also have engagements that we've started with all African, it's the African Consul Generals in America, you know, so we're working with their chairman right now, because what we've for years, anybody that's been following our work for the last 3-4 years will see that we've been screaming we've been screaming trade with Africa, trade with Africa. But all
Yes,
of a
yes.
sudden we're realizing that, oh, before trade can actually happen, the people that should be driving trade, they don't even know how to engage. That's the gap. So
Yeah.
we've now committed that the next 1 year we want to train 1,000 business and policy leaders
Wow.
in our masterclass,
Wow. Wow.
because
Wow.
our goal is to advance trade. The opportunities are right there. And the way I say this is, you know, years ago we had the California gold rush. The story of California, you know, California became California because people migrated there because there was a gold rush. But the reality is, even in that space, if you show up to a mine and you don't have the pickaxe, you don't have the equipment to drill, to pan for gold, you'll just be talking. And for a long time,
Yeah.
Africa has been talking about trade. Talk, 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 talk. But the numbers are not shifting. You know,
Yeah.
the numbers are not changing. And we are
Yes.
saying why? It's
Yes.
because we don't have the tools,
Mm.
the instruments of trade, understanding it, how to sign, what not to sign, how to negotiate, where to be. If you're in this room, how to talk, how not to talk, how to
Mm.
follow up with an investor. We do a lot
Yes.
of investment engagement, but we don't follow up.
Mm.
Something as simple as following up, because these people are so busy. You are the one asking for their money, right? You're the one asking them. And then human capital development is also huge. Let me give you an example. You remember this pen? I told you I was invited to President Ramaphosa's investment meeting in New York. I was in the room with
Yes.
American investors, and this is what they said. You're asking us to build our businesses in your country. We're doing that. But there's now a shortage of labor that can support our businesses. How do we upskill? Because these businesses, they're operating in the next gen technology, next gen AI. In order to run this factory, we need this type of skill set, but we're not finding it in South Africa. What are you going to do to upskill your people? So you'll be amazed that in order to grow industrialization, to grow manufacturing in any part of the world, things like welding, the you know, that the industry, the what do you crafts people,
Yeah.
they are
Technical skills.
the
Yes.
technicals. That's the most important.
Yes.
That's the most important. It's not somebody, it's not you and I wearing, you know, suit and tie with our pen and paper and we are doing, no, it's the
Yes.
people
Yes.
on the factory floor.
Yes.
Do they have
Absolutely.
the skills? Do we have the technical schools? So
Yes.
before we start saying Volkswagen come, Mercedes-Benz come, as a business investor, they are thinking 5 years, 10 years down the line, am I going to have a shortage of skills?
Mm.
So all of a sudden, in the world of trade and investments, we need to start understanding, as we're dealing with investors, what do the investors care about? As we're dealing with buyers, what do they care about? We need to start mapping these people. We need to start building strategies, and that's what China does that. US does that with us. Do you know US knows more about Africa than you and I?
Mm.
So if you want to penetrate US market, you need to start understanding how that market operates. So for us in retail, the way we ship to Florida is different from the way we ship to Michigan, because winter in Michigan is longer than winter in Florida. So we will ship bathing suits first to Florida before we ship it to Michigan, because we look at the temperature. That's what I'm saying, market intelligence.
Wow.
We know what's, so another example I give is, if you compare Texas to, let me see which region now. One is coming to my mind, but those two regions that I'm thinking about, those two states, when you ship female apparel, the sizes you ship has to be different, because in one region, most of the women, they are very outdoorsy and fit. So you cannot ship more than size 12. In another region, you have to ship size 20, size 22, because that's the demand. If you ship size 22 to this region, you're not going to sell it. There's nobody that will wear it, because the women in that region, they only go a certain size. That is market intelligence. Those are the things we now need to start saying, okay, spicy food. You're going to sell more spicy African food in Texas than in Idaho. You're going to sell more spicy African things in the southern part of US than in the northern part, because of the taste and the way they do chicken, the way they flavor chicken. The flavor is different. So those are the things we say. So we are more like, if you give me a product, I'm more likely to ship it here than ship it there. That's market insights. And that would be the next the next phase we have to, when we've walked people through trade and investment engagement, the next thing is market insight. Because now we need to go to school. We need to go back to school to start learning. And that's how China penetrates Africa. They know your language. They know what you think. They know what you want. They know how you dress. They know your culture. They map you with, okay, if this is a young man of this age, you know, this is what he buys. He's going to buy a TV in the next 1 year. This is how we're going to market a TV to him. He's going to buy, he likes watches. This is how we're going to sell Chinese watches to him, right? So those are some of the things. We also teach a class called Sales and Business Development, where we actually help people to start creating customer positioning, customer profiles, and value proposition. Because now, if you want to sell in America, you need to understand how they think, how they spend their money, right? Because you want to sell them something. Basket weave, you know, from Africa, fruit juice. And finally, let me share this true story. And this is why market insights and consumer profiling is so important. There was a project a while back that introduced South African wine to the US market. There was a lot of, you know, clapping, yay, we did it. But guess what? The wine did not last on the shelf because the American consumer said your wine was too sweet for them. So they didn't buy. And for things to stay on the retail, it has to...
Sorry to interrupt there. The very important part you were saying about the wine, we missed your audio there. Can you just repeat that? They were clapping hands after the show, and then what happened from there?
Yes, the wine, when the South African wine got on the shelf, the US consumer, the buyers, they said the South African wine, the flavor was too sweet for them.
Wow.
So if you want to bring wine into the US, you need to gather data to say what palette would sell. So you don't just bring anything into this market. If you want buyers, do some pilot tests, get feedback, and start producing wine just for the US market, knowing what it is they want to buy.
Wow, wow, wow. That's a very powerful story. And where is it now? Has the South Africans managed to mend their ways and make...
No, it was pulled. It was pulled from the shelf because from a buyer only wants something that is selling. Absolutely. That's how they make their money. So they are not, so it's not charity. Even though it makes sense and it looks good, this is not, they can't sustain their business if this is charity.
Yes,
So
yes, yes.
it has to, you have to bring products in that people want to buy and they really, really want to buy. That's how everybody wins. So it becomes important to be designing products and commodity that will sell. And
Yeah,
one opportunity that Africa has, it's the fruits and nuts and the gluten-free space.
yes,
Africa
yes,
has a lot of nuts, cashews, macadamia nuts from South Africa, from Botswana. Those are the things now we should be pushing to the US
yes.
market.
Yes, I'm normally told by farmers that macadamia trees are more valuable than platinum in today's world. But that's a very fascinating example you gave there. And, you know, when I take that and I contrast that to what happens in Europe, where South African wine is you know, listed among the top 5 wines. You know, you simply need to take a walk in any European city and see how all the dinner specials are, you know, based on South African wines and all that jazz. So it's really fascinating that a palate could have such a powerful impact, you know,
But
on
remember,
choices.
but
Mhm.
remember the influence the British have on the continent
Mhm.
influences how the wine was grown and fermented,
See, I see.
right? So if you think about the metropole, most of
Mhm.
the things we do on the African continent was designed around the history, colonization. We were
Yes, yes,
producing things for them.
yes,
So of course, a lot of the wines that we're doing today, we naturally fit into, we are more westernized
yes,
in
yes,
terms
yes.
of British, not we are not Americanized, but we're from the British. So naturally, it's a natural fit.
Mm.
So of course, most of the people even drinking the South African wines are from Europe in South Africa.
Yes, absolutely true. Well, colleagues, I'm ready for your final take. We have about, what is this, the 8 minutes, is it eight? About 12 minutes remaining before we close our session. But in the meantime, Toyin, there's a message here from Media Fella. These are the guys that do our webinars for us in terms of designing and stuff. And he was saying, thank you for your talk tonight. It sounds like Nazaru is a go-to place for trade education. Keep up the good work and
Thank
thank you
you.
for being a champion for Africa. You truly are a trailblazer. Whilst we're working towards closing, can you just tell us about your upcoming Nigeria Investment Conference,
Oh,
what that
wow.
is about and what's going on, and the dates and so on?
Yes. So one of the things we do cover in our master, I'll tell you, a lot of the work we do is driven by what we see. So in the master class, we actually shared the importance of export promotion and investment promotion,
Mm,
right? Export promotion is educating the world on what it is you produce and what it is you can supply,
okay, great, yes.
right? A lot
Mhm.
of times we in Africa, we are waiting for buyers to know what we have. They don't know.
Mm,
They don't know. We should stop assuming that buyers know what Africa. It should be Africa or South Africa or Nigeria or Ghana. In fact, there's something we're working on for some buyers right now where they're telling us, okay, Tony, you're telling us to buy from Africa. What is Africa supplying? What does Africa want to supply? They don't know. So it is our responsibility to educate the world on our exports.
mm,
Okay, that's one. Similarly, investments is the same. It has to be our responsibility to say what it is, what the investment opportunities are in our region. We cannot stop, we have to stop assuming that
mm.
the world knows agriculture is an opportunity, that industrialization is an opportunity. What I say to the West is they need to listen to the aspirations of Africans, but then Africans has to spill out and educate the world and talk about what your aspirations are. So the Nigerian Investment Conference is our attempt to articulate what investment opportunities are with Nigeria.
Mm.
So we're working closely with the government because it's a public-private sector partnership.
Okay.
So they're bringing like the ministers, the all the political people to the table. We're also bringing the business community to the table, but we are doing it in such a way that we're going to make it available to people that are looking at Africa's largest economy to see what are the opportunities. So we're working with investment promotion agency, and we're looking at export promotion agency to say it's their job to promote these things, but we have created a platform that we can bring that information to the right people that can actually trade and invest. So, that's the key, is that we need to now start being louder. Africa
Yes.
needs to be louder
Yes.
for the right reasons, right? And we need to own our own narrative. We should not let the media control our narrative. We need to own it, and we need to drive the conversation. So that's what we'll be doing. It's also going to be part of the preceding engagement to Nigeria's 60th independence celebration, which is October 1. So this will be like 4 days before that. So it's part of the what's next. It's been 60 years. Where are we going?
Yes.
So
Yes.
we're happy to be partnering. And the reason we can also partner is because the value we bring to that conversation. They've attended our own past engagements. You know, one of the policy leaders that was here in Chicago last year was like, "Toy, you need to bring all my colleagues here." Even
Oh,
we,
yes.
yes, he said we too, we didn't know all these things, right? So we all need to start, we should stop assuming that everybody has the answer. No, we all need to start growing and learning together and partnering and supporting, to know that even our policy makers, they are well-meaning, but we also have to encourage them to acquire more skills. So for us, even at Nazaru, we also approach them with knowledge, with content, with information, because we know when we know better, we do better.
Wow, 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 Toyin, thank you so much. I mean, you've closed it so beautifully that, you know, I don't even want to mess it up by saying anything more than that. But safe to say that, as Media Fair just said now, you are truly a trailblazer. Thank you for flying the African continent high, you know, in that environment you're in now. Thank you very much for your grace, for your willingness to share knowledge, Toyin. I was very, you know, impressed when I asked you, and without any doubt, you just said, let's do this. So I really appreciate that. You know, I'm a firm believer that time is the best gift someone can give you, you know, so thank you for sharing that gift with us. And I wish you luck in the conference that's upcoming. And certainly, I mean, I'm your new #1 fan going forward. So you'll be seeing me in those forums as time goes on. So thank you very much. And to our guests, thank you for having faith in us as well. This was a very intimate crowd. I like intimate crowds because these are interested people in what we have to talk about. So thank you guys for constantly being there every other week when we're hosting these sessions. I hope you guys have learned a lot as well. And please do drop us, you know, comments and whatever future topics you'd like to hear us talk about. If you are also an expert and you believe we can host you here, we will be more than happy to do that. This is the whole idea. We want to accelerate intra-Africa trade and particularly trade facilitation. So this will be an ongoing series, at least until the AfCFTA is being rolled out. I still believe that this, the holding back of the rolling out of the AfCFTA, I think it was supposed to be launched in July. I still think it's a mistake. I still think it needs to be revisited. When you are in the hole, you need trade to get you out of it. So please, colleagues, let's join hands in this mission. And until we see you again in due course, thank you very much, Toyin. Thank you, colleagues. And until we meet again, have a lovely, lovely evening further.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Toyin. Goodbye. Walk safely to your kitchen or wherever you're walking to now, friends. Have a wonderful evening. Goodbye.
You too. Bye.
Cheers.